The kind of punk emo scene is different from elsewhere because they've got some focus on house shows because of lots of venues closing and stuff like that.
When I moved to Southampton, I saw a lot more original bands for starters. You see a lot of covers bands, but really I think what this scene thrives off is the original artists who write their own stuff and play their own stuff, of course. But I think what I noticed as well with a major difference is that it's a sense of, we are all here for the music at the end of the day. Great music is the common denominator, but you can chat with anyone about anything in this scene.
I've played shows here in Southampton, DIY shows, and I guess not less DIY than DIY shows, but when you think of like DIY, you kind of think of like tiny venue, kind of like 4 or 5 bands, real cheap entry kind of thing, but that's not really particularly what it is. Like as you go around and tour and see a lot of these places, like a lot of places, and play a lot of shows, the whole DIY thing is just kind of anybody that's doing it not for a company, what I would say would count as DIY. So I guess the only shows we've ever played in Southampton have been DIY shows. I've played shows here at the Joiners, but they've all been for Ricky, or we played shows for other people that put on one-off shows every now and then kind of thing. So yeah, playing down here, and then I just moved down here, and I've started a band down here as well. So I guess my role will become more of actually part of that scene from playing music within it.
I started doing a radio show when I was at university, the wrong way around radio show thing, and then about a year into doing that, I started doing house shows because we had connections with labels, and then the labels were sending us CDs. If anyone remembers what CDs are, and they were like, "Oh, do you put on shows?" I was like, "No, we never really had the money to do it." So then we started putting on gigs via Fat Wreck and Epitaph, and still had European bases at that point when punk was still popular. And then we started putting on house shows at Newcombe Road. Obviously our landlord wasn't aware, and then that was the third year of university, we started doing that, and there was 40 people, 40 plus the bands in our living room, so we'd move all the furniture out, and then that was kind of my first time that I did the DIY punk shows. down here, other hardcore bands take them out. So all kind of the original hardcore weird stuff that has now become Creeper as a whole, but 8 years ago in the living room. And that was my introduction to Southampton's DIY scene, and then it's kind of snowballed from there. And that was, 7 years ago from the house shows.
I started going to house shows back when I remember I found out about number 3 about 4 years ago, and I didn't really feel at home in Southampton until I discovered number 3. That was like a real home for the Southampton music scene at the time. I think that's the strongest I've ever seen it. I was going to shows before then, but the shows at number 3 and then moved on to Rat House were incredible, especially the early number 3 days, because there's this tiny house with lots of tiny rooms, and every room would just be packed. I'd have like 20 people in there, and I saw Knowles there, Our Time Down Here, Creeper played Rat House, so many amazing pop punk bands, and bands that would come like from length and breadth of the country, like just to play this one community. There's always a good crowd there, and just the nicest people. Some of the nicest people I've
One that kind of stuck in my memory recently was my my first ever house show, which was a band from Brighton called Muskets. I was so terrified going to my first house show. I had no idea. I've only ever seen videos of house shows just being sweaty carnage, but when I got there, it seemed like there was an amazing sort of respect for the surroundings, but at the same time everyone just wanted to party and have a good time, and there were people crowd surfing in the kitchen, and that just sort of stuck in my memory. In terms of gigs in Southampton I've seen gigs on like a bigger, grander scale with more production, but I don't know why that one just stuck in my head for being so like an experience.
to let a shit ton of people into their house for the first place. Like, I can't highly praise enough anyone who puts on a really good ring of house shows, because that's bravery. And I've never lived in a house where I'd be able to do that, but even then I still think, would I allow all of these blunts to come into my house? And people are generally quite respectful, but yeah, a lot of time for that. It sucks that Rat House finished, but I understand that there is a shelf life on people being able to hold house shows, and that's not something that should be fought. Like, people putting house shows on, they're probably only going to do it for a couple of years before they get really sick and tired of cleaning up their trash kitchen. No matter how nice people are, you've got 30 to 50 people drinking in your house. Even if everyone is positively fucking Edwardian in their manners, you're going to have a mess. Something will get accidentally broken because people aren't nasty, but people are fucking clumsy, and then you have booze into the mix. All of that, your neighbours, and tie that into kind of student movements. When you live in a city with 2 universities, and it only seems to be Solent that has any kind of scene like this, because I don't want to get class warring about University of Southampton students, but they tend to be culturalist fucks. You get a 3-year turnaround of young, energetic, creative people. Some people stay, which I think is why the Rat House continued so long. 50% people who are actually from the area, and 50% people who went to Solent and stuck around. Otherwise, it tends to just be people who are students, so you've got this constant cycle. I know you feel trapped, reaching out to no one. You said just take me away, you got chance for my feet, big dragged onto.
Scenes kind of like dip before when certain people have sort of gone for their bigger things. Like, for instance, like there used to be certain people that ran Lennon's for literally 10 years and then left to go to London. And when the new people came in, it was really difficult, like, I think, to begin with. But now obviously everything's fine and no one really knows the previous scene, so everything's kind of gelled together.
Over the years, there's been like a really strong like DIY ethic in Southampton, like a really cool like community. Started back probably 2007 up until now with bands like back in the day, like Will and Ian's old band, Our Time Down Here, used to play shows all the time, like King Alf, like Ian's old band, Take 'Em Out. Used to have like cool community where there'd be bands from Brighton doing like gig swaps and stuff and playing shows here, and all our bands would go and play shows down there. There's quite a lot of like new people like coming into like the music scene all the time down here, like with the university. I think that really helps. In the past it was kind of a bit like a cliquey scene, I'd say. Like, you go to shows and like if you didn't know like maybe like 50 people, maybe it could be a bit intimidating whether you mosh to a band or get involved. But I know that there are a lot of people that were keen to kind of just like completely scrap that mentality from the start, which is why I think Southampton's always had quite a good close community. Like have like shows like Ricky Bates' old flat and stuff, where there'd be like acoustic shows and people would turn up, bring your own booze.
Every chicken shop is stained, but stop and boring all I found. There's nowhere more lonely or less friendly than the buses and the underground. I'm a stranger in your town, and I'm out of luck, out of pocket, out of the game. And I was hanging by the skin of my teeth, my bed was made. And I'm out of luck, out of pocket, out of my mind. I got done up like a kid, passed soul down the river and capsized.
Everyone's really nice, and basically it offers a welcoming environment and a lot of variety. You don't have to be into heavy music, you don't have to be into like really hardcore bands or be really clicky about it. You can just go to what you like and no one really judges you for it. And there's just a lot of sort of everything that you would want.
Chances and lucks run out. It's alright to break the mold sometimes. And God knows I've tried to reconcile the feeling that you buried yourself alive.
In comparison to the rest of the UK, I think Manchester's got a really good DIY scene. So is Exeter. It's weird. It pops up in bubbles. Like the DIY scene was good in Lincoln for a bit, and then it was crap again. And then Portsmouth, where I first moved down here, like 7, 8, 9 years ago, Portsmouth was the DIY kind of space, apart from the house shows here. And then Portsmouth is now terrible, and everyone from Portsmouth's gone to Brighton. So Brighton has a good DIY scene. So it's everywhere, it kind of varies. So things pop up in bubbles for like 2, 3 years or 4 years, and then they kind of dissolve because people lose money or they lose passion or interest or whatever. It's just kind of the way it is. I know up north, obviously Leeds out Spike guys and Book Your Anfest and Dundee, like that's all DIY and they do a really good job up there. So I think Southampton has been one of the best DIY scenes ever about 5 years ago, and then it's now crawling back to where it was, but it's all relative to the people that live here. So a lot of the people that were part of the DIY scene left and went to Brighton. So if you don't have that scene of actual human beings, then you can't do it. So obviously now there's this kind of new generation, but it's a really entire generation group of people coming through who are at uni.
They start to get warmer at night. In my head it's not much different to December. As the weeks go by, my body slowly melts away. Down the drain, past your house, I'll wave goodbye, I'll be someday.
there's a lot of people that do a lot for the scene, as opposed to, I mean, Bournemouth at the moment is just kind of coming back around because they have promoters now that put on more gigs, whereas that was where I was from before I lived in Southampton, so that kind of died on its arse a bit really. And it's only just coming back round, whereas for as long as I can remember, probably since I was about 13, 14, Southampton has always had like a massive scene for, especially like DIY punk, like ska punk, that sort of thing.
When we go to parties, you know exactly where to go, who to suck up to, so that you can powder your nose. You're breaking me, I'm breaking out with breaking up. We're breaking up.
I'd say the emo and punk scene is sort of growing, and we feel like having moved here we can help to expand it further, putting on like bands like Headrush that otherwise might not get on like UIC shows, so we help them out.
I think it's a massive community. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of like full kind of acceptance and embracing everyone into our scenes. But I think generally, yeah, it's a community. I don't know where I'd be without music scene. I wouldn't have met you. wouldn't have moved probably.
I'm always caught out in the rain. I'm not talking metaphorically, talking about the weather. I'll put my shoes on your radiator. She said, let's sit down and talk. I'm not ready for another storm. She stands in front of the door, arms folded, and I need a new escape plan. Not a fan of confrontation. I'm all about acting like nothing went wrong, and I'll put it in a song and I'll sing it like 3 years down the line. She said, why you being like this? I said, the only thing I'm being is wet, and this is no time for jokes. And I say, do I look like I'm joking?
I think the biggest challenge that Southampton music scene always seems to face is finding venues that will have us for a long period of time. I think there's a couple that have cropped up recently that seem quite promising, but last couple of years it's been harder and harder to put on shows because places like Goblets or Ingdale House, a whole bunch of others, Soul Cellar even, have been closing or being harder to put gigs on. So it's I think the main challenge is just finding a home for it. There's not, other than I guess the joiners, there's never really been one sort of central place.
It's certainly not localised to Southampton. That's every scene around is finding venues. When you've got the new bill actually that came into power this week about planning permission around housing and not being able to be affected by noise limits. That's really amazing, and will hopefully go some way to rescuing this. But it's still the fact that bars are the primary places for bands to play.
Joiners and 1865 were both in really built up areas, so I mean I know 1865 more than the Joiners has had a lot of complaints, and that's all new build. The venue was there first, which is even more frustrating. And so I know that like there's been shows that I've been to where they've had to like turn the volume down, and it's just been ridiculous. So yeah, that like noise abatement laws, that's just something that I guess everywhere suffers from. In Southampton specifically, though, I guess, I don't know, if Ricky ever left, that would be a massive problem, considering he's responsible for a lot of the, like, sort of more DIY shows that happen at the joiners, like the American bands that come here and stuff like that, as much as they are touring bands, not necessarily like DIY. But I suppose the way he runs his production company is. I don't really know, like, I guess as long as there is always promoters and people that are willing to do things, I guess there shouldn't necessarily, promoters and spaces to do things, like that's, if there's those two things, then I don't really see why there should be many problems.
Where Southampton is geographically is perfect because the local scene is not limited to bands from Southampton. So you go an hour or a couple of hours west and you've got Bournemouth and Exeter, and, you know, especially Exeter, you've got great bands coming out of there like Bangers and Muncie Girls and, you know, Fairweather Band. You go up north a bit, you've got, you know, Birmingham and Bristol, you've got bands like Rain and obviously, like, you know, bands that are sort of making more of a mainstream impact now, bands like Milk Teeth. Again, you go up north in the other direction, you go up northeast, you've got London, very sort of easy to reach, and loads of bands are coming down from London now to play Southampton. It's kind of like this, everyone kind of centres on Southampton quite nicely, so you don't have to be a band from Southampton to necessarily be a Southampton band. I was doing this article recently where I'd like write up the top 10 bands from Southampton, and like the obvious ones, you know, Creeper, Bury Tomorrow, and, you know, a handful of others. And I was like, oh, what about that band? They're in Southampton all the time. Turns out they're not from Southampton, they're from London. And it's like, ooh, so what bands are from Southampton? And I found myself having to dig quite deep.
Whatever size your band is, it's kind of, you can come here and play and you won't be playing in a room that's too big for you or too small for you. It caters for everybody, but the experience is always the same with the people that kind of run it. I think the people that are part of the DIY scene here are very sort of conscious of keeping that ethic, instead of like, you know, I put on big shows, so well, you know, let's do it for the sake of doing it. It's more like, I can put on big shows, but I'm still going to do my small shows for bands that I like and be involved in it. And I think that's what sets it apart, is how deliberate everyone is in trying to stay part of that, stay rooted in where it started.
All in one breath, I fear I am something you forget.
the end of the day, it is all about the music, and it is all about, you know, there comes a time when the bands do need to push something. So I've sort of noticed that, especially with a few bands that have been heading into the mainstream right now. I guess this is the point where I talk about someone like Creeper. Like Creeper, obviously band from Southampton, sort of grew up on that DIY punk scene. They've had a few years to sort of, you know, get themselves used to that now so they can flourish into the mainstream. And I think as they have flourished into the mainstream, their attitudes are very still, you know, still very much a sort of, you know, we do this ourselves, we try and make this, you know, as sincere and as DIY as possible, and, you know, we try and take as much of this into our own hands as possible. And then I think as it becomes more of a commodity and it does become more about the commercial side of things, they are able to adopt things like their iconography, like the whole thing about the callous heart. I don't think I've seen a band be able to captivate an audience as well as Creeper have since, like, My Chemical Romance around the Black Parade era. So what, like, Black Parade turns 10 years old this year, and they had that Black Parade uniform and they had that ideology, and I think that's what Creeper have done in a similar fashion. So yeah, it is more about the commodity on that side of things, but on the lower scale, where you're doing your house shows and you're setting everything up yourself, the whole DIY element, I think it's more about the community.
Obviously, like the two biggest bands out of Southampton at the moment, probably Bury Tomorrow and Creeper. So Bury Tomorrow, I probably first saw them for the first time when I was about 17, so sort of 11 years ago. They've had to work hard to where they get to now. And then obviously Creeper came from our time down here, who were the epitome of DIY. They did everything themselves, you know. And the support network, like, is what I suppose between bands, even though they're completely different. I mean, Bury Tomorrow went out with Creeper last year for a small tour, and you know, the fact that they will support each other, and also the amount of people that come to shows in Southampton, like Southampton locals, like they kind of make, I guess, the bands what they are, as much as they probably would hate me for saying that.
Washed off on me, what a way to come clean. Could have I leant in, gave a hand to dry in the slippery slope that you're on. I can't get over here, lend me your backbone, not the bend in your neck. I can't get over here, lend me your
The DIY community has always been adaptable. Like, this city and probably Bristol are probably two big cities that put on house shows quite a lot, and that's a really positive thing that we can do with the position we're in. We're at university, we live in student areas, so we can abuse the noise levels and we can do these sort of house shows and DIY events, which usually we'd be doing at venues, and with venues closing down, we'll always be looking for new ones, and there'll always be new pubs there that will tolerate us just because we'll buy drinks. And if not, they'll tolerate us because they actually like it and they like us as people. And I think that's the main thing. We're not a bunch of hood rats or like angry people. Like, We're just some guys who want to play music, and girls who want to listen and play some music as well. And we're just here to sort of make something that a lot of people don't do. A lot of people just go out to clubs and live boring lives and just go do 9 to 5s, and we're just here to do something a bit different.